Hello, everyone out there in YouTube and Facebook and social media land. Thank you for joining us. And also, I'm a little rusty and ready to get back on track. I've been away for a couple weeks, so had lots of messages asking me if I'm okay and where are you? I think everybody's used to me being super loud around the repeal of Section 43, and I was pretty silent. So thank you, everybody, for reaching out. And thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Today, we are going to talk about discipline, and we're going to get right into it because we really do need to talk about discipline. Even on our Facebook No Violence for Kids Canada today, there was some discussion around that with a horrific photo that's been circulating around Canada today from the Northwest Territories that appears to be a teacher dragging a child through a parking lot. So this really does make this call to action urgent. We really, really need to help teachers out and get them support where they need it. And we call on the Canadian Teachers Federation to recognize call to action 6 to repeal Section 43. That does not say revise, that says repeal. An absolute ban against corporal punishment and using violence against children in schools. So anybody who can help us out, we also are making a call out to any youth in Canada. Write your MP. We know Senator Stan Kuchar is ready to hear from you. If you're unsure on how to do that, please reach out to us, or go to No Violence for Kids Canada on Facebook. Watch for our posts. We're making a lot of posts, making that call out and sharing the addresses and ways to write letters. As well, if you need support to write a letter to your MP or senator, we are here for you. We are a volunteer collective of Canadians that are working really hard to get this repeal passed and to raise awareness that there is a difference between punishment and discipline, and that teachers and parents really need support to understand that difference. And we recognize it is turbulent times. So people are under stress. Kids are at more risk, and families are at more risk for violence. So thank you for being here. I am here in my home in on the Kwantlen Nation territory, and I'm really grateful for all of the work that all of the nations across Canada and across Turtle Island are doing to welcome white settlers like myself into the conversation of reconciliation. I am a listener and a learner, and just here to keep speaking up. So thank you for joining us. I am super happy that one of our volunteers, Amy, is with us today. So I'm going to bring Amy into the stream. And of course, we welcome comments as we go forward. Today's plan is to introduce Amy. Then we're going to go through a series of questions talking about discipline today. Here we go. Hi, Amy.
Hi.
Welcome yourself.
Yeah, I'll just introduce myself. My name is Amy Vaughn, and I'm a counselor and child advocate, and also a child counselor from way back. And I am currently in my friend's home on Tsleil-Waututh traditional territory, as well as Squamish and Musqueam traditional territory, I believe. But I'm right here in the Burrard Inlet. And I'm so happy to get to talk to Danielle, because it's always so fun.
It is so fun when we talk. After I talk to Amy, I don't know what it is. You bring me this. So you have a real energy. So I'm so grateful that you're here, and I'm also so grateful that you're part of our team at No Violence. Thank you. Ready to get going?
Let's go.
Let's just talk about discipline. That's what we're supposed to be doing, right? So I have a list of questions. They are in the description box below. If anybody's interested to know what we're going to be talking about, we're just going to go through these series and see what comes up. So what'll happen is we'll ask Amy the question, I'll summarize, ask the next question, and we'll loop around like that. Here we go. The first question. What is discipline, Amy?
What is discipline, or what has it become in child and family psychology and in parenting? I think it's so sad what it's become. But I mean, my understanding of it, I did learn a little bit of Greek in college, and the word discipline, the root word is to teach. It's about teaching, and that's all. It's about imparting knowledge. Being a disciple is about being a student, and being on like a learning journey. So it's not even just a one time of imparting wisdom, like a discipline. To be a disciple or to be disciplined is just considered this gradual like gaining of knowledge over time. Um, and then if we think of the word discipline outside of child and family psychology, of course it means that you work up to being really good at something and being immersed in something, really embodying
Mm,
something. And so, how it's used in the child and family world and in religious circles is quite a huge shift away from that, which is my understanding of discipline in those contexts is that it is non-physical punishment. And there's
mm,
a lot of other words that kind of go with discipline that try to make it more palatable, like consequences or things like that. But unfortunately, it is used to mean, yeah, just like a punishment that is considered less severe or, more palatable than physical punishment because. Since the 80s and 90s, a lot of people have moved away from physical
mhm.
punishment to discipline.
That's right.
So, what do you think?
Well, I'm writing notes, lots of ideas. This is really, um, when I think about discipline and punishment, I think it's everything that sums up my whole career when I come to my volunteer work, everything I read about. So looking at this frame of what is discipline and punishment from like an international policy justice, national domestic level, right down into parents and teachers, and recognizing that what you're saying, punishment, right? Up here, maybe the old school way, we always thought that was the way to teach, very fear based, right? There's not the hierarchy is very clear, there's power structures in that. So that's important to think about. It's about being afraid and teaching through fear or being scared or feeling bad. So if somebody feels bad enough about something or they're hurt bad enough, they'll change their behavior. So I think about punishment is that discipline for me is now, so I go punishment, coercion, force, and then discipline. And discipline is kind of on the other side of a more positive protocol where the disciplining is actually happening inside the self, like you said, to a procedure, to a thing, right? So it's a learning, ongoing learning to the self and an ongoing teaching to the other person or the other process. So I think for me, discipline is procedural, it's expected, it's predictable, it's neutral. So it's not an emotional thing. It's more of a neutral, you know, there's a clear amount of expectation and it's not surprising. So anybody that's in that realm of discipline, so for positive discipline, it's very expected. There's no surprises. And so it's more about teaching the procedure as there's a learning journey, like you said. That's kind of what I think about. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So that's a lot. So when I think about discipline for parents, it's about moving that paradigm shift that you talked about. Our generation grew up in punishment. Now how do we shift what we know with neuroscience and the brain decade of the brain, what we know about health and wellness and psychological well-being, and children's rights. All of that tells me that we need to move towards discipline, and after discipline would be cooperation. Ultimately, that's what we want. So, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely can blab on for days about it. Let's move on to the next
Right.
question.
Okay. Sure. Sure.
Okay, here we go. Let's see what we have here. Amy, is discipline fair, kind, firm?
Okay. Which discipline again? Um, I think if there is the emphasis on teaching rather than punishment, of course, right? Like if we went into a new job and we didn't know something, hopefully there's somebody there that's going to guide us and teach us and be like, this is the way it is, and this is what's expected. And I think that's very kind and
Mm-hmm.
fair. And we've all had wishy-washy bosses, and they're like just really, really hard to work with and for. So firm, yes, very important. Clear, very important. Um, so I think discipline can be all those things. But as parents, if we try that, but we have a punishment in our back pocket in case the discipline doesn't work, like again with the boss scenario, imagine how ripped off you would feel, or at least how insignificant the kindness and fairness would be if you knew that there was a fear tactic at the end of it, right?
100%.
Like you wouldn't really be able to engage in learning and have your brain and body system open to new ideas and new ways of being, which is what discipline can be, the learning component. If you know that it's just kind of a carrot on a stick. So
Valuable.
yeah, I think it definitely can be. I mean, children have been taught since there were children. No adult in the history of adulthood, has a child and then just expects them to be able to fend on their own. Like human children, they just can't. So every child needs to be taught. Um, that's not in question. It's the how.
Well, and I think that's a really important point because when we're thinking about teaching and learning, the brain is open when it's safe.
Yes.
So there's a difference between discipline and punishment because punishment is fear-based, which could, the risk is sending that brain into that threat, fight, flight, freeze state, which is not a learning state. I like where we're going with the sweet spot, right? Kind, firm, fair, friendly. And it's okay to be firm as long as there's predictability and safety in that. And I think the messy waters is really where good parenting is really recognizing that we're about, we want cooperation after all, and that includes being kind no matter what. Um, Easy, no. Yeah, I just wanted to touch. We have a question from Moondog. Thank you, Moondog. I know that you've been signing in almost every week, and this is a really important question. What is your opinion of faith, neither psyche, promotion of natural consequences versus Stephen Molyneux? I don't know how to say that. No discipline approach. So, my opinion, which I'm not sure how much value that has after all the work I've done under this umbrella and field, but natural consequences to me, I throw them out the window because they tend to engage in physical altercation or what the child is doing right now. And that is not a planned event. And that is a risk of elevation. So I would call that a deconstructive escalation. That would be a risk towards punishment. So I think when parents don't have a plan and they're making a plan on what the child is doing right now, although natural consequences to a child not wanting to wear, pants on a winter day, that's their choice. So, really make a decision. Is it always natural consequences or is it dynamic? The no discipline approach, I worry about these phrases because I believe in discipline. I think protocol is important. Tell any frontline worker to show up at a crisis and tell them to not use protocol, right? That's not a safe thing to do. So we need to stay regulated and neutral in these times of high stress when there's risk of threat for a child so that we can give them stability. And that's really important. So a no discipline approach could lead into free range parenting or permissiveness, which in my experience, in my opinion, too permissive leads to violence. So I hope that helps you. Do you have any answers or anything to add to that? Amy?
It was what do we think of natural consequences and a no discipline approach? That was
Yeah,
the question.
the verses of that.
Yeah, I think natural consequences can also be used by parents as punishment. It really depends. And I remember reading a parenting book on this. I think it was Alfred Cohn or something. He wrote Unconditional
Alfie
Parenting.
Cohen, that.
Very, very, very good book.
Yeah.
Um, And what he said about natural consequences is just kind of like, I mean, what would you do for a friend? What would you do for somebody um, that you were just kind of concerned about and not trying to teach a lesson? So I think if natural consequences is used by a parent to try to teach a lesson, they're not natural.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
if your kid's heading out the door in shorts and a t-shirt in January and you're like, I know he's going to be cold, like, usually they're willing to put something in their backpack. Sending
That's
a
a good
kid to
compromise.
school
Yeah.
cold,
Yeah.
when you know they're going to get cold, the chances of them being at school and being cold and thinking, "Oh, I wish I'd listened to my mom," are not very good. Probably just going to be very miserable and cold.
Yeah.
So, there's enough natural consequences in this world that our children are gonna face, and some more than others. The world is a harder place for some children than others. Like um, we don't need to put that on our kids. We don't need to make natural consequences. They'll come home from school with natural consequences, and we can help them process that. They will make mistakes on their own,
Yeah.
and we can kind of be a compassionate guide through that. And in terms of no discipline, yeah, like I said, every child needs to be taught. But cultures other than mine, which is Western European, white, Caucasian settler culture, there are indigenous cultures that have a much richer tradition, or at least closer to our time, richer tradition. I don't know many of my own traditions from my own culture that are good at discipline, that just really find beautiful and gentle and non-shaming ways to teach, aside
Mm.
from threats and punishment.
I love where you're
Um,
going. I just wanted what came up in me there was the idea of like green theory and like queer theory and recognizing this intersectionality and moving towards the ultimate goal is that we all belong in the biosphere, right? We're all a part of
yeah,
this. And so really it's about cooperation. And yeah, definitely the white settler history and Me Too was not about that, right? Children were seen and not heard, and ideology and scripture and history of our my ancestors. Luckily, in my history, there wasn't a lot of like violence, but it was definitely hierarchical,
oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's so important to talk about like different. I'm really interested in international parenting perspectives and seeing, my daughter has really brought light to me around the Inuit culture and how that kind of looks, right? And it's just so much about observation and joy in a way,
Yeah.
and welcoming children into the environment of cooperation. Yeah, really interesting. Let's move on to the next question. Um, this is such yeah, we're going all over the place. I hope everybody out there is sticking with us. Please make a comment if you want to join in. We're working through these questions. I think this is so. How does predictability help with discipline, Amy?
Hmm. Yeah, that's such a good one. And I think, a lot of parents have trouble, and I definitely have, with like, what what are the rules and standards supposed to be? So how do I know when my child is doing something wrong? How do I know if I'm supposed to discipline them at this point or not? Like and if you are looking for standards out there in books or media or parenting coaches or counselors, like, you can get
Oh, too much.
anything
Yeah.
anything and everything. um, it took me a little while as a parent to get to this point, and I have a really long way to go in terms of noticing my own discomfort with something. So there are more predictable, I would say, I don't know if I would say rules, but responses
Mm-hmm.
from me. My son is better able to predict how I
Mm-hmm.
will respond since I started listening to my own comfort or discomfort, and not stopped trying to do what the book said. There's a lot of good stuff in the books, but you can get a little bit paralyzed trying to find everybody's advice.
Like
So there's
100%. Yeah. Go
that's
ahead.
okay. Go. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to add to what you're saying because when I work with parents, a lot of what I hear is this competition. Social media is rich with opinions on how to parent, and there's go into chapters now. And I won't lie, I love parenting books. I'm a bit of a freak around this stuff. But what I hear from parents is like, all these books are great, but how is this practical? Right? How does this do with me? And I think that's the most important piece. I can't say enough. After all this, the work we do, the expert is the parent. The parent understands that child. They know if a child's hungry. They know the context of what cooperation looks like in the best circumstances, right? So competition is really important to think about around predictability. What gets in the way? And I find that predictability is so important when it comes to discipline because it's about transparency. So, you know, Goldilocks, like, come on over here and let's talk about what it's going to look like when we have a disagreement. Let's have a plan. This is what I expect for myself. What are your expectations? And let's do this. You can choose how to behave because that's the struggle with all this. We can't actually choose how to behave. That's on them. They get to be their own person. But what we can say is when this happens, this is what I can do. And when this happens, this is what I can do. And make it very predictable. So that way we can inspire choice making at a time of stress. And I think that's really valuable when it comes to predictability and discipline, is having a plan that's collaborative together. Because the reality is kids don't follow parents' direction 100% of the time. So without having a plan, then we're actually might sink. And I always say that what happens in that situation, we lean into punishment and we say things like, that's it, Johnny, you're never getting your phone again, or we're never going to grandma's house again. That's infinite injustice. You know, so predictability can make things doable and safe, and also empowers kids to make a choice when they know what the choice is about.
Yeah, I love that. I love that you're not talking about predictability and discipline as necessarily when somebody does this, we do this. Like these are the rules, and when the
No,
rules aren't followed, we do this. It's more predictability in how do we respond. So with what attitude and in what sense do we respond? What values do we bring to solving problems as a family? Do we try to be curious? Do we try to be creative? Does everybody truly have a fair voice or a democratic voice? And if not,
100%.
it doesn't mean that that has to be true. But
Nope.
if not, how do we set this up? So the predictability in how to approach it and in what manner, which goes back to safety, rather than the rules.
No, perhaps. I'm glad that's exactly why I added this question. Because oftentimes what I hear parents say, which is a trap, consistency, right? Consistency is a parent trap when it comes to this because it doesn't add to that idea of Dr. George Holden's amazing work on dynamic parenting, right? Is really recognizing the goal is cooperation and we must be flexible and our approach must be safe and that needs to be predictable. And so, yeah, the ultimate goal is that idea that we actually really, really discipline is about respect and kids deserve that. They are the epitome of where we need to place respect. So, yeah, yeah. We have a couple. Moondog's on fire, everybody. Okay, so Moondog. I don't know Moondog, but I think Moondog knows parenting better than we do here. I think some really incredible. So here's a question. I don't know if we'll get to it because I don't know this work, but Amy, maybe you do. I know you work more in indigenous work. So I have some experience in understanding the history there, and I do recognize that that is a culture I want to talk about more when it comes to discipline. So, what is your opinion, Amy, on the writings about the discipline of the children in the book Disrobing the Aboriginal Industry? I don't know this book. I have a bunch up here, mostly around this stuff, but not that one. On the one hand, Albert Howard praises Canadian Indigenous for not using corporal punishment. Then he said this on the Ontario TV show, The Agenda, Aboriginal Identities, posted to the Calling Toronto 14 years ago. He says it is from, oh, I don't know what that's about. So I'm sorry, Moondog, we won't put you there, and we're gonna move on. It sounds like an interesting thing, though. I think we should have Moondog on here.
I think
Moondog,
so.
wanna come in live?
You want to come?
We're welcome to have you. We're gonna move on to the next question. Where are we at here? This is one for Amy. I think this is for you, Amy. Ready? How can discipline help to recognize and regulate emotions?
Okay, yeah, and I also just want to say to Moondog, it sounds like that information, that book, that question, and that comparison, like I just think that would be a very rich discussion. And, I won't really pretend to know that much about it, but I would love to know about it. So also, I invite you to come if you're comfortable. We'll talk to you after. How can discipline help to recognize and regulate emotions? I've never thought about this. Recognizing and regulating emotions is my bread and butter, but
Yeah.
the word discipline is throwing me off because I always think of it kind of negatively. I mean, if it is used in that kind of gentle teaching way, oh yeah, of course it can help to recognize and regulate emotions. And in the way that it might be used there, discipline would be more of a I mean, yes, parents can directly teach, especially when a child isn't so activated, isn't so hyper aroused or low, is a good time to intentionally teach about regulating emotions. Um, but the main way children learn this from us is by watching us. Um, so, yeah, is that what you're looking for?
I'm looking for the word co-regulation here.
Co-regulation, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So if we are also students of regulation and being aware of our emotions, being accepting of our emotions, and just kind of being comfortable with different emotional states. A lot of us were brought up with a very narrow window of acceptable emotions, and this is why it's so hard for us. To let our kids be themselves and to let their emotions express themselves without editing and naturally is because we can get triggered by their natural beautiful expression of emotions because of how we grew up. Um, so yeah, for me, discipline in this context would really be around awareness and acceptance, and like we've talked about before, a lot of self-compassion around our own emotional regulation and our kids. And maybe not in the moment, but at another time when we're calmer, we could ask ourselves, like, what is really the worst that can happen if our kids' emotions are not within this like pretty picture perfect little box that our society allows for them.
What you said was so special because when I thought about this question, and it's something I ask the parents that I work with often, coming into this idea of recognizing that discipline is procedural, you have it set up and transparent, it's predictable ahead of time. It's a collaborative process that's set up between a parent and their children to avoid escalation, to avoid high conflict, really. To recognize there's going to be moments like that in this relationship, in this interaction. What is our plan? Right? So it's that plan. And then it's helpful because with the protocol, it's easy to recognize that, we're going to go there into this protocol in order to kind of get regulated again. But parents, especially, have an important responsibility to know that co-regulation is everything. Children don't learn to regulate on their own. They learn to do that by a parent or a caregiver that's near them and close to them and they trust. So to me, it's discipline is about preventing high conflict and finding peace together and being aware of our responsibility to know those patterns, right? So it's not about being cold, it's about being ready and being clear with what our boundaries are, right? It's normal to be human and frustrated when kids don't follow our direction. That's normal. And that frustration can be seen as or perceived as from a child as an invitation for conflict.
Yeah.
And there's a high risk there, right? To lead towards an escalation. And so I think discipline helps to recognize and regulate emotion because discipline is about transparency, it's about humanity, it's about compassion. And discipline is about teaching together and learning together that these are frustrating moments and we can rely on a process that we've taught each other, that we're teaching and learning together.
Yeah, I think it's really tragic that teaching, aka formal schooling, and emotional embodiment and emotional skills have just been so separated.
Mm.
Because if you've ever had a good teacher, you learn from them on a non-cognitive level. You can drop down into their presence and their peace, and then whatever they're saying you can kind of take in,
Yeah.
but it's almost secondary, and it really makes you love learning. So I think a true teacher and guide is really going to embody that regulation.
That's so important because there's a difference between our emotion and our behavior. And I would argue emotion is going to come through us like a wave. And if we try to control that, that can get ugly, right? That will go
Yeah.
into our body, our physical self. We can
Yeah.
get crunchy and uncomfortable and explosive.
Yeah.
Accepting the feeling and, emotion is going to be uncomfortable. It could be all kinds of things.
Yeah.
But then recognizing that our body is experiencing that
Mhm.
our body is actually behaving the emotion and it's crunched up like this, or we're talking louder, or our eyebrows are sharp, right? So I would argue that regulating emotion, Amy, is a sham, right? I would argue that what we need to do is regulate our behavior and accept our emotions.
Mm,
What do
I
you think?
like it. I
Yeah,
like it. I
I think
do. Yes.
throw people under the water, all these specialists that talk about it, but
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, I would rather. And when I think about the classes I've tried to take, or the teachings I've tried to come under, are for meditation and mindfulness and
yeah,
regulation, and just how they haven't really fit with me,
yeah,
because I just don't, there's something inside me that just doesn't really like
yeah.
being manipulated at all, even if it's towards something good. And these are buzzwords right now, the regulation and the mindfulness and
That's the
all
best
this kind
word,
of stuff.
right?
And yeah, that's just not reality. And
No.
also it's often appropriate to get really upset, right?
It is. That I think it's so valuable that it's like I get really worked up thinking about that because a lot of the issues that I see happening or the situations is that parents are really upset at their kids when our kids talk back or when they ask their parents not to yell at them. Or and I say to these parents, you know what, it sounds like you're raising really aware children and they've got some pretty good standards on what respect feels like for them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
also they have courage to speak up about it.
Yeah.
And so high five for that.
Yeah.
What are we hearing? And recognizing that emotion, that child probably senses that parent being super busy, really stressed because of the system, right? The pressure on parents, but it falls on the child when they see it. They're the one calling it out,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And they're the ones getting medicated and in trouble for that. And
Yeah.
so I think that's really important. We talk about more about the idea that it's a behavior that
Yeah.
we are accountable for and that we need to send a lot of compassion to
Yeah.
ourselves. I also want to say Shivani has chimed in, and Shivani is one of my heroes, actually, an amazing parent management training specialist out of the CMA KPC, so one of my peers. And I can tell you, we used to share an office. If there's somebody that I would recommend recommend learning from, it's the Shivani. So I always like the Shivani. So I love you, Shivani. You know that. And regulate behavior and accept emotions. She loved that. I think I probably got it from her. You know, to be honest. So I know I got a lot from Shivani. So I'm so happy that she's joining us here. Okay, you ready for the next question? Let's see what Shivani
Yeah.
thinks about the next one.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I think we've touched on this one. Should children be involved in setting up discipline?
Yes.
Yes, we got it. Absolutely.
Yes.
Otherwise, it's not predictable and it's punishment
Yeah.
or coercion.
Yeah.
So if we
Yeah.
want true discipline, they are involved in that plan and they agree to the plan, whether it works out every time or not, they still need to have a say in it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, it's their right, right? Children have a right to be involved and participate in decisions affecting them. That's part of the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child, and that's a hard one to get our mind around.
There you go. And not only that, but they're brilliant. I was so lucky that my first practicum supervisor was a child and youth counselor, and taught me how to do family counseling in this incredible way, where every single time we would sit in a circle and get ideas from kids about these problems that were just baffling the parents, and they were really simple and they were really effective. And these kids could be really young. So yes, yeah, once you unlock that, it just kind of feels like magic. And nonviolent communication is a really good
Marshall
way
Rosenberg.
to start learning how to get your kids to problem solve.
Big fan. And I agree 100%. Marshall Rosenberg inspired me so much to become a mediator. So I'm a huge fan. Thank you for mentioning Marshall Rosenberg's work. And if parents are looking forward to that, nonviolent communication, the art of nonviolent communication, amazing. There's some really good YouTube videos about that as well. I like where you're talking about is that children being involved in setting up discipline, and that when we do ask them at a neutral time and talk about this, hey, there's sometimes a direction or all of this, you don't want to follow my direction. What should we do in those times, right? Maybe morning routine, that might be a different thing. Let's talk about that. What is it going to be like after school? Or when you're on your screen time and you don't want to turn off Minecraft? Like, we need to hear from kids what they would like to happen. And oftentimes, you're right. When parents practice this, they come back and they're like, kids can be a lot harder on themselves. And you got to be careful with that. So they internalize a lot of this.
Yeah.
So inviting them into the conversation, when we do that, we're actually teaching what we want. So it's setting expectations, and it's less likely to be a high conflict when we're able to have conversations like this. So absolutely, children should be involved in anything that affects them.
Right.
I mean, yeah. So here's the next question. So I think we've touched on it, so maybe just a quick, what do you think is the difference between discipline and punishment, Amy?
Yeah, I feel like we've gone over this quite a bit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fear and respect are not the same thing. Predictability, transparency, children's rights, safety, neuroscience, all the things, right? If you're not sure, Amy or myself, we can walk you through that again.
Good summary. Yep.
Final question. Amy, what advice do you have for parents regarding discipline?
Just is something that I often try to keep in my head for my relationship with my son is to just do the same thing, not the same thing, but in the same manner and with the same attitude and approach as I would with an adult. Awesome. In any issue around problem solving. The other thing is as a counselor, I've done a lot of work on my own childhood. I'm quite aware of what worked for me and what didn't, and I have intentionally used that. And a lot of parents, when they get triggered and something's happening with their kid and they remember how much it hurt for them. If you can work through some of that stuff, that I have found is one of the most powerful guides in parenting. It's like you see them, you see their hurt, you can feel it, just like you've gone back in time like 35, 40 years. And it's a really good guide to be like, what would I have wanted? And I know what not to do, because that might have been done to me. But what do I wish somebody would have done for me?
I love it. That's so important because I think when working with parents, it's all, one of the first questions I ask is, where do you get your parenting inspiration? And often, I don't want to parent like my parents, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about what they want to do, but a lot of parents know what they don't want. And so when we discover that, there was a lot of conflict, or, that we have these traditions in our family that were, exclusionary and not equitable, and that was harm. And so doing something different without practice is really hard. So I think the first some advice I have for parents is to keep practicing and to show so much humanity for yourself. Changing these kind of cycles is the hardest work of a lifetime. And it's very uncomfortable when we live with conflict, right? It's not comfortable to move towards something new when this is shrouded in feelings of unsafety. So it can feel more unsafe to move towards safety in these situations. And so recognize that, rely on some sort of protocol, come up with your kids, be collaborative, because the protocol can help in crisis, what to do next. When you have an idea, you're able to step away from the conflict and think about, what you can do next. And make a plan and talk to your friends and say, can I practice this with you? Role play it. And, and when we do lean into a little bit on the punishment side of things, give yourself grace and always, always revisit it and say, I wish I did better. Kids need to see that humanity. That's part of being disciplined, is that vulnerability.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Getting comfortable apologizing to your kids. It's a good thing.
Overall, discipline is safe and it's respectful. And it can be many things, but it is about being a learner and a teacher. And if we're trying to think about what our goal is, our goal is the relationship. So we're learning how to have a better relationship. That's what discipline to me is about. Under times of stress, how do we keep our relationship? Yeah, we have one more comment, and I don't know who it is. Let's have a look. Oh, I think it is Moondog, Alice Miller. Well, there we go. Now we're talking language, Moondog.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of Alice Miller. Said that unless we work through our traumas, it's not good enough to be opposed to corporal punishment on an intellectual level only. We must be opposed to it on a subconscious level too. And if there is one comment that needs to be shown, it is definitely that one. Thank you so much, Moondog. Any final comments, Amy?
No, but like I said at the beginning, discipline is a difficult concept for me to reconcile. And the way you just described it, how to keep relationship in times of stress, is that what you said? How to preserve relationship okay. Then I can be a big fan of discipline. If that is what discipline is, I can get behind that. I think it's a wonderful definition. Yeah.
Thank you. What a beautiful conversation. There's still lots to unpack. This is complex. This is complex, and this is all new to our world. I really want to thank you, Amy, for this amazing conversation. We're not sure what we're going to talk about next week, everybody, but we'll get there. We'll figure it out. If you have any ideas or any topics that you want to talk about, please let us know. And if you want to join us live, welcome to do so. Thank you so much, Shivani, for your comments. Thank you, Moondog. And just so everybody knows, right now, this is in the second reading to ban call to action 6 is in second reading. Thank you to Teacher for all of his work. And encourage all parents to write a letter quickly to Stan Teacher and his team. The more letters, the better. So join us on Facebook, No Violence for Kids Canada, or join us here for Like All Things. Thank you for being here, and have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Bye.